Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old-timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. I think I'd have to double check the calendar. I'm actually horrible with dates, by the way, but I believe this is my last show before Thanksgiving. Yeah, it's next Thursday. I'm pretty sure of that. When you don't have kids and you're unmarried, and self-employed, a day is a day. You know, I don't really decorate for the holidays. There's no point. Just a few family members, so make sure I get a couple Christmas presents for them before time. And other than that, what's my Christmas? Enjoying a meal and watching National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation and A Christmas Story. Love A Christmas Story. Always spend some good time with my mother, but it's quiet. My holidays are quiet, and I really love Thanksgiving though. Really, I always think about Thanksgiving when my grandmother was still alive and cooking for the big family. We had a huge gathering every year for Thanksgiving, and it's kind of interesting. I was talking with Cassie Clark. She has a great podcast called Where the Dogwood Blooms. It's all about North Carolina culture and history and food and everything. And she interviewed me a few weeks ago, and there were technical problems. And in that one, we really talked North Carolina food. But that show didn't turn out. She interviewed me again last week, where we mainly ended up talking about music and telling funny stories and just that kind of side of North Carolina culture. But it's a shame because we really did discuss a lot of good recipes on that. Anyway you look at it, if you enjoy hearing me tell stories, which, I can't seem to help but doing, check out her podcast. It's really good. And one thing I wanted to mention, I got an email the other day letting me know that the Southern Appalachian Herbs podcast has been featured in the top 20 Southern podcasts on a website called FeedSpot. FeedSpot is called the Podcaster Database. So if you want to check that out, it's podcast.feedspot.com/southern.podcasts. And Cassie also let me know that my podcast was featured along with hers, in a list of top North Carolina podcasts. So thanks, y'all. Thanks for making that happen. I appreciate it. But we talked a lot about cornbread in that first interview. And really, Thanksgiving and Christmas was the only time my grandmother would bake cornbread. Now, I know that's going to surprise a lot of y'all. If you're not from the Eastern Carolinas, probably the only cornbread you know is baked cornbread. Well, and if you're only experienced with Southern food, if you're from the Midwest or up north or something, or another country and you visited the States, which I have a lot of international listeners. It's pretty cool. I always enjoy hearing from people from Poland and Australia and all over the place. Anyway, if your only experience with Southern food is eating at Cracker Barrel, you only know baked cornbread. You've never heard of fried cornbread. And I'm not going to say a word against Cracker Barrel. Back, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I got to know one of the founders of Cracker Barrel. His name is Jack Lowry. I don't know if he's still around or not. Probably is. He was a tough old bird. Um, he was a Lumbee Indian from Pembroke, North Carolina, and went to law school in Tennessee. And he and some other guys there, like roommates and friends, founded Cracker Barrel. Really great guy. Just I hate to say anything good about an attorney, but I've known about three good ones in my life, and I'd put him in that category. Very, very decent guy, as far as I know. Very down to earth and very friendly. He was mayor of Lebanon, Tennessee, when I met him, and I used to spend a lot of time around that area. But they decided to go with the Tennessee style of baked cornbread, which is what most people know. Now, I would say east of Raleigh, and probably more the coastal regions of South Carolina, you're going to find fried cornbread. And it's very different. I think it's probably the oldest style of cornbread in the United States because you got to remember when our uh, ancestors settled here, or mine did at least, they didn't have corn as part of their diet. Corn was a Native American crop. Corn had been popularized in Europe to some extent by the Spanish due to their colonies, around Mexico and such. But it was not the bread. It was not the bread of choice. In fact, some of the first colonists got here and they learned to cook with cornmeal. Um, you may remember the story of the Pilgrims who were kind of late comers, actually. I mean, the Spanish were here long before the Pilgrims, and then Jamestown colony and the Lost Colony. Really the Carolinas had colonies long before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. But, the Native Americans there, the Indians, I don't remember which tribe it was for some reason, it's not coming to me, taught them to grow corn. Well, really, the reason the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock instead of going on down, I think they were heading for Boston, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I think it was. And there was already an established settlement there. I mean, we kind of get taught a false narrative of history in school that has a lot to do with the mythology of Thanksgiving. Okay, but they stopped there because they ran out of beer. I mean, the crew of the ship, the people, beer was necessary for survival. So they went on land to try to find some grain to make beer. And the first thing they did was try to figure out how to make beer out of corn, which absolutely can be done, but it's certainly not as nice in its undistilled form as a beer made from barley. Distilled, of course, it's whiskey, it's bourbon, if it's well, depending on where it's made and everything, or just moonshine, And Cassie and I talked a lot about that as well. But the coastal Carolinas did have more of a Spanish influence than people realize. Really long before Columbus landed and all that, the Mexico City was really a huge force in the Americas, and they had trade routes going well up into North America. When the Spanish took over, they really kind of took over what they call the King's Highway and all that. It goes like straight up to New Orleans from Mexico City. Well, not a straight route, but you know what I'm saying. Spanish actually had forts in Morganton, North Carolina. They had forts Savannah, Georgetown, South Carolina. Of course, you know about St. Augustine, and all the places they had in Florida. But yeah, there was a big Spanish influence. So my supposition, trying to tie all these loose ends together, is that when your English, your Irish, your Scots-Irish immigrants got to coastal North Carolina, they already found a culture that was cooking with cornmeal, and probably something very similar to a tortilla. Now, a corn tortilla is made from masa, that is cornmeal that has been nixtamalized. That means it's been treated with lye. Lye comes from wood ashes. It's not, a chemical in a box you get from the store. It actually comes from wood ashes. That makes it more digestible. That was like the secret of Aztec survival, was the nixtamalization of corn. They actually learned it from the Mayans, before they ate most of them. The Aztecs were not very nice people. But anyway, the Mayans were probably the most advanced people in certainly in this hemisphere for thousands of years. But the Mayans were very fierce warriors, and of course you have the Toltecs and the Olmecs and all that really interesting culture down that way. But anyway, Mayans are the ones that really developed corn. And I say that because you take that masa, you take your nixtamalized corn, and you could just mix it with water and a little bit of lard, and yeah, really the fat's kind of optional. If you had to, a little water and salt, if you didn't have fat, would work just fine. And you form a little ball and then press it as thin as you can, and you put it on a hot griddle, and it actually kind of puffs up as it cooks. So you turn it over and cook the other side, and they're absolutely delicious. I like to put a little lard in mine. I would think of it more of a survival food without the lard. I think the lard makes it very nice. The Southern fried cornbread is merely a slurry of cornmeal and water, a little salt. I mean, it's like a very thin pancake dough. You put it on a hot greased pan, and yeah, basically kind of spreads out like a pancake or a tortilla, and it fries up. It stays a little thick in the middle and gets crispy and lacy around the edges. And it's crunchy and it's delicious. Speaking of Jack Lowry, the Lumbee tribe has become famous for doing collard green sandwiches. They take 2 pieces of fried cornbread and some fried fatback and some collard greens with a little vinegar, hot pepper vinegar on there. Make a sandwich out of it and eat it. Really delicious stuff. So I love fried cornbread. And Cassie said, in her husband's family, and he's from, I think his family connections they were all Eastern North Carolina, like Fayetteville, and then really down close to where my family comes from as well on his mother's side. And then she has family in Wilmington. They call it hoe cakes. Well, that's interesting because hoe cakes in Virginia, and from what little experience I've had in Kentucky, I haven't spent a lot of time in Kentucky, but definitely a lot in Tennessee, are thicker. The mythology of it is that a hoe cake was to be cooked on the blade of a hoe over hot coals from a fire. It was sort of like poverty food, but you couldn't make it as thin as our Eastern North Carolina fried cornbread, or it would run off the hoe. It's actually thicker, maybe a quarter inch to a half inch thick. Some people call that a pone, but actually pone is more like a baked cornbread. That was actually where you would take the cornmeal batter, and we'll get to that in a second, that you use for baking cornbread, and you cook it in the fireplace. You could cook it actually in the ashes, or in a Dutch oven tucked into the coals. Some people call it corn dodgers. Dodgers is actually an old word essentially for dumplings. So if you think about a thick, like chewy dumpling you'd have in chicken and dumplings, that would be more of a corn dodger. That usually, well, I have a couple of cast iron pans that are actually corn dodger pans. They're actually made. I think Wagner did them a Lodge. I got one that's like, from the 1920s, and then one that was a reproduction probably in the 50s. But they actually have a little mold that looks like a little tiny corn cob. They're pretty cool. My grandmother had those, and I inherited them. I got a ton of cast iron, old pieces. Some of them going probably back to at least before the Civil War, and maybe as far back as the Revolution. The ones with the little legs on them, you sit in the fireplace and all that. Old bean pots. I've got like a 24-inch wide frying pan that's just like perfect for doing frying big catfish or a lot of chicken at once. And then all kinds of little pieces I use here and there. But I got a ton of it. Anyway, that's how you do fried cornbread, okay? Like I said, it's merely you want fine ground, plain cornmeal. Don't get the self-rising for fried cornbread. It's going to puff up. It's not going to be right. So plain cornmeal, and to me it doesn't matter if it's white cornmeal or yellow cornmeal. From white corn or yellow corn. My mother insists on the white corn. I think that was my grandmother's preference as well. I don't really see a difference between the two of them, to tell you the truth. And anyways, like I said, it's just a thin slurry of cornmeal, water, and salt fried up in the pan, and it's delicious. And that's like the staple. That's something we have all the time in my family. I mean, like weekly, at least a couple times a week, fried cornbread. You could put some chopped onions in there. My uncle used to like put in chopped onions and chopped jalapenos. That was very good. I do that sometimes. A little bit of cheese is nice. It really, I think, is more of the Spanish influence. But now the rest of the country, as I said, they know baked cornbread. Well, baked cornbread, for that, most people will use a cornbread mix, and I don't have a problem with that. Okay, so baked cornbread is, well, self-rising cornmeal. Now, ground corn does not have gluten, so it doesn't rise with yeast. You have to use chemical leaveners. Well, those chemical leaveners, don't let them scare you, are baking soda and baking powder. Baking soda is activated by an acid. You mix vinegar and baking soda together in school when you're a kid, right? It just foams, right? So a lot of people will put buttermilk in there to activate the baking soda. Baking powder will rise based on the temperature. Most cornbread mixes, I think, have a little bit of both. And if you're not using an acidic compound in your baked cornbread, you're really not getting much of anything from the baking soda. But those mixes are they're no fail. It's just basically cornmeal, self-rising cornmeal. So it's mixed with those two chemicals. It's got salt, sugar, and some flour. So if you want to make it yourself, just take your regular. I would go ahead and get some self-rising cornmeal, even if you didn't want to use a mix, because it's already done. But you can absolutely add baking powder and baking soda to it. It totally depends. The proportions depend on how much you're making. So I'm not going to give you an exact measurement on that. The sugar you can add to your taste. Go about. Basic recipe, I would say half and half cornmeal and flour, and use self-rising flour as well. 2 beaten eggs, a bit more than a cup of milk, and like I said, buttermilk helps a lot. 1/4 cup of or so butter, melted butter, and a tablespoon or more to taste of sugar, and maybe a teaspoon or more of salt. I tend to go a little heavily on the salts when I make breads. I find most recipes go a little light on the salt, but not too much. Now, too salty is never a good thing. Just you're gonna have to practice and do it to your taste. And if you're using the plain cornmeal, at least add some baking powder. Now, like I said, that is heat activated as opposed to the acidically activated baking soda. But if you want to get it nice and fluffy, use both. What's really nice, and this is what Cassie said is her favorite, is take a cast iron frying pan and put some bacon grease in there. Get it good and hot on the stove, pour your batter in, and then finish baking it in the oven. And that's going to give you nice crunchy edges. It's going to give you that, it's delicious. Honestly, a piece of baked cornbread with some extra butter after it comes out of the pan or the whatever, and cut a wedge of it and put some honey or molasses on there. That is like one of the best things in the world. But like I said, my grandmother only baked cornbread maybe twice a year, and it's because she was going to make dressing. Dressing is, there was a little controversy in Victorian America. For centuries, thousands of years actually, there are stuffing recipes. There are many stuffing recipes in Apicius's ancient Roman cookbook. They stuffed ham, they stuffed birds, they stuffed everything. All it was, stale bread, some herbs, maybe some cheese, some chopped nuts. They're very big in ancient Rome to include chopped nuts in a stuffing. And you'd stuff. They had pheasants, they had peacocks, they had stuff like that, and they would stuff them and roast them. Well, to the Victorian English, the word stuffing, it could have even been a little bit earlier than that. I shouldn't say just the Victorian English. I'm going to go back and just say, I don't know. Let's just stick with Victorian, but I think it probably does date a little bit earlier than that. They thought stuffing was a rude term. I'll let you use your imagination of why they might have thought stuffing was a rude term. So they called it dressing. Well, that's caused huge amounts of confusion in cookery ever since, because all the English cookbooks and most of us in English-speaking nations learned to call stuffing dressing. Well, officially, stuffing is what's stuffed inside the bird. Dressing is served alongside of the bird or other meat or whatever. So stovetop stuffing is not actually stuffing. It should be stovetop dressing, but no one asked my opinion on that. Obviously I wasn't even alive when it was formulated. But The basics of it are always the same. It's a way to use stale bread and a way to stretch out the meal and to really get all the flavor out of whatever you're stuffing, right? You would stuff your stuffing, I'm sorry, into the cavity of the bird and bake it, roast it in the oven. Nowadays, health experts say don't stuff a bird. They say it can cause food poisoning. I don't know, okay? Truth is, there was really no such thing as salmonella and other fowl related foodborne illnesses until the commercial production of chickens and turkeys. And to this day, as best I know, and this is as of last year, I checked on it. Yeah, as of last year when I was writing my cookbook, salmonella had never been found in an egg produced on a farm, backyard egg, only in commercial chicken houses, which were filthy. That's why they stink so bad. They're really inhumane and filthy. So, whereas all the old recipes call for, raw eggs in your mayonnaise and undercooked, I mean, I like soft scrambled eggs. I like my eggs barely cooked. Or you think of Rocky Balboa drinking the raw eggs. Now the health officials freak out about that. Well, it's because they've actually encouraged, in some places mandated, that our meat and eggs be raised in disgusting, inhumane conditions. Joel Salatin writes about this extensively, and the government's gone after him hard for him just pointing out that chickens that can get out in the sunlight and walk around and eat bugs and grass and such are healthier than those that are confined in the big commercial chicken houses. The government hates him for that, and they've literally gone after him with everything short of the FBI. I mean, and then I wouldn't get too cocky and think the FBI wouldn't be coming knocking down the door in the middle of the night. Um, our government is certainly weaponized against us. Anyway, the dressing that we made in our family was never stuffed inside of the bird. It was always a dressing and served on the side. That is very much the English influence in my family's cooking. So my grandmother would put stale bread in it, of course, right? If she had a few slices of leftover white bread. A couple of biscuits, if there were a couple of biscuits left over from breakfast. She made, homemade buttermilk biscuits every day. But predominantly it was a cornbread dressing. So she would bake that loaf of cornbread. This is one of the last things she taught me how to do. She was sitting, in the kitchen in her, well, it was a walker with a seat. It wasn't a wheelchair. I always say wheelchair, but it was a walker with a seat. And she walked me through the whole process. Because see, you need a good broth for this. You need a good chicken or turkey broth for this. And because, of course, the turkey wasn't going to be cooked until Thanksgiving Day or maybe the day before, she would make it out of chicken. Just take the chicken, still on the bone, put it in a pot, put water in it, and in this, she would just do a tiny bit of salt, tiny bit of pepper, and a few of the herbs, maybe that she might be using in the dressing, but probably not. The thing with making dressing is it can get way too salty way too fast. If you make your broth salted like you'd have it in soup, by the time the water has evaporated, you have ridiculously salty dressing. You really don't want that, okay? So it's better actually not to salt the broth. So and it's just boil it down to the meat falls off the bones, pull out the bones, pick all the meat off, sit it to the side because you're going to use it in your dressing. And I'm just talking a couple of chicken thighs. We're not talking like a whole bird here or something. But you could. It just depends on how much you're making. Take your bread, take your cornbread, take your stale biscuits, whatever you got. Break them all up, mash them all up into crumbs in your hands in a big bowl. Pour enough broth over it just to wet it. Okay. Take a couple eggs, anywhere from 1 to 4 eggs. Again, depends on your taste. Break them, mix them in there. Chopped onion, chopped celery. Yeah, that's about it on the veg. Put your meat back in there. You want to do a couple of chopped boiled eggs. That's really good as well. And just mix it all together and bake it until it's done, until it's firm and it's kind of crispy and dried around the edges. The trick is you have to salt and pepper it, of course, before it's cooked. And that means you have to taste it with raw egg. My grandmother would just reach in and pick up the mixture and taste it raw. No problem, right? for food safety reasons, I would say take a pinch of it and cook it. Just throw it in a pan, pop it in the microwave, and cook it through, and then taste it. Add enough salt and pepper to taste. And that's, if she used any herbs, it would have been parsley. But usually because she had celery that had the tops on it, that had the leaves, she didn't. But yeah, a little celery, a little sage, always goes really well in cornbread dressing. You can do parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Those are the same herbs you're probably going to be putting on your turkey. So really fantastic, and that's a true family recipe for me. It's a true holiday recipe for me, and it all starts with the controversy over cornbread, because literally twice a year she baked cornbread, and it was to make dressing for Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I'm starting my Thanksgiving preparations tomorrow. I'm gonna smoke a turkey. Yeah, I've got I'm down at my mother's place, and I've got what I call my hillbilly barbecue pit. I took an old one of those little Weber grills and a spare tire donut off of a car I sold. It was actually junked, so I just grabbed the old spare tire donut out of there. I cut the tire out, so it's just the metal rim, and I put it on top of the grill, so it actually makes the grill deeper and bigger and gives me that room to smoke something in it. And actually, the grill grate fits perfectly into the spare tire donut off of an old Volvo station wagon. So I've got some lump charcoal. I'm just going to do it that way, and some wood chips. And the wood chips I'm going to be using are wild cherry, because while I'm smoking that turkey, I'm going to be sitting there carving a couple of spoons. I'll have the spoons up probably on for sale by Wednesday. Last week, I put a set of cherry wood spoons up for sale on my judsoncarrollwoodcraft.substack.com site, and of course I featured it in the newsletter for Southern Appalachian Herbs podcast, and it sold so quickly. I mean, I put out the announcement at like 10 a.m. and by noon they were gone. So if you want some nice cherry cooking with spoon set from Wild Cherry, which is really hard to get, for yourself or a gift for a loved one for Christmas, be sure to look for that like right away on Wednesday morning. I will put out an article and I'll tag on an announcement about that. And remember, my spoons, my baskets, my books, subscriptions to my Substack newsletter, they all make great Christmas gifts. And now let's get into the herb of the day. One other thing is I'm considering this. I've never done any kind of live stream, video or podcasting. I'm going to be sitting by that barbecue pit smoking that turkey for 10 hours. I may get online and do a little something. I don't know what. Could be nothing. I might not. If the wind's blowing and it is supposed to be chilly, and it would rustle against the microphone, I'm not going to be doing anything like that. But if I'm, sitting there, maybe I'll turn live stream on YouTube or a live broadcast here through Spreaker, and play a couple tunes on the guitar or tell a story or something. That's really, when I'm cooking barbecue, I love to have a few friends around and a couple of beers and just tell stories and play music. And, maybe I can kind of invite you into my world a little bit, such as it is. But like I said, a cold front came in last night. Temperatures already dropped 10 degrees from yesterday to today, and tomorrow's supposed to be cooler. So we'll see how it goes. But let's get into the herb. This one, definitely one of my favorites, Chicory intybus. You know what that is? Okay, well, that is the official name of chicory. Real chicory, wild chicory, considered a weed by ridiculous people. Also known as blue sailors, coffee weed, common chicory, cornflower, not to be confused with another plant that's also called cornflower, which is very, very different. And Italian dandelion, or succory. Succory is the old English term for it. It is essentially a blue dandelion. It is in flavor, very similar to dandelion. The root tastes much better as an addition to coffee. I never say it's a coffee substitute. and medicinally, very somewhat interchangeable. The chicory, of course, has been cultivated into the Belgian endive or endive, you know, and it's become a popular salad green, whereas the dandelion has gone in the opposite direction. People used to eat far more dandelions than they did chicory, and now they eat probably far more chicory than they do dandelion. I really do like the wild one medicinally, but the cultivated, the endive or endive, I don't even know which I say more often, is one of the, it's a good salad vegetable, but what's really good, it's really good, is to take them and just trim them up and cut them in half and just slowly braise them in a pan with some salt and butter, a little bit of white wine, and that's one of your best cooked vegetables, actually. That's really tasty. They have that just subtle bitterness, and when they cook like that, they get a little subtle sweetness, and you get this kind of bitter sweet, and you get the acidity of the wine, a little bit of saltiness. My mouth actually just started to water. I haven't had that in a long time, and it is really good. Really good. So, um, like the dandelion, chicory is not native to North America. It was brought here by European immigrants to be grown as a medicinal herb and a vegetable. Chicory, um, it's a weedy plant. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's one of those that grows in poor soils. It pops up where you don't expect it, but I don't think it should be called a weed. I don't. A lot of these plants. I mean, this is from my book, The Medicinal Weeds and Grasses of the American Southeast. Actually, these plants have naturalized in almost all of North America and much of South America, plus Europe and Asia. So it's certainly not specific to the Southeast, but that's my region. That's my reference point. People have been using chicory as a medicine as long as recorded history. It probably originates from northern Africa, maybe Western Asia. The ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans all valued the plant. In fact, the ancient poet Horace said, let's see, this is in Latin. Uh, mm, as for me, or I prefer, it's mi pascunt, as for me, olives, chicory, and mallows provide sustenance. So Horace claimed that he lived only on olives and mallows and chicory, which would indicate that he probably had either very aesthetic taste or a really bad stomach, because chicory is a really good stomachic herb. Mallow is great for ulcers and diarrhea and all that. Um, and then olives are also bitter. So yes, he definitely could have had a very bad stomach. It's kind of the ancient Greek version of the Southern Sunday dinner with collard greens and mustard greens and bitter greens with vinegar to go with some fried pork chops and all that. So it's not that weird to think about, even though apparently he didn't eat meat. And like I said, probably a very bad stomach. You could easily substitute for the olives like some relish or chutney, and collard greens for the chicory, and okra. Okra's in the mallow family. So yes, I mean essentially that's like a southern meal from ancient Greece. But anyway, as for medicinal use, the great Roman poets and philosophers waxed eloquently over chicory, and the Greek physicians recognized both its culinary value and its medicinal value. Dioscorides wrote of chicory under the name Ceres, and he talks about one that was cultivated in the garden and one that was wild. So already they had begun to improve, as they say, the plant. He said that taken with vinegar, they stop the discharge of the bowels. Both are astringent and cooling for the stomach, but the wild one was best for the stomach, and they would comfort a disturbed and burning stomach. Applied with polenta, which in his time would be any crushed grain mixed with water, they're good for heart conditions. He doesn't say exactly how to apply them, so yeah, maybe eaten with polenta or applied as a poultice. I have no idea. He said they help gout and inflammation of the eyes, so that would be used as a poultice. So I think that's where we're going with that. The herb and root are rubbed on to help those who are touched by a scorpion And with polenta, they help kill erysipelas, which was a streptococcal skin infection. The juice from them with lead ore, we're not going to be using that, and vinegar rubbed on those who need cooling. Yeah, let's not even worry about that. Heavy metals were once much used in ancient medicine. These days we try to stay away from lead and mercury and a lot of stuff like that they would have used. Pliny the Elder wrote, wild endive or chicory has certain refreshing qualities used for ailments, essentially. Applied by way of liniment, it disperses abscesses. A decoction of it loosens the bowels. It is also very beneficial to the liver, kidneys, and stomach. A decoction of it in vinegar has the effect of dispelling the pains of strangury, and taken in honeyed wine, it is a cure for the jaundice. If unattended with fever. So jaundice with fever it wasn't good for. It is beneficial also to the bladder, and a decoction of it in water promotes the menstrual discharge to such an extent as to bring away even a dead fetus. In addition to these qualities, the magicians state that persons who rub themselves with the juice of the entire plant, mixed with oil, are sure to find more favor with others and to obtain greater facility in anything they may desire. So, I don't think you really ought to go rubbing yourself with chicory juice. Don't. Maybe people had really bad. They didn't bathe a lot back then. They had body odor a lot. Maybe it kind of helped with body odor, and that may be why you might find more favor with others. But I hardly think it was magical. There's really scant mention of history in the Middle Ages, but it should be noted that in the monastic era, I'm getting so tongue-tied here, I better get a sip of something to drink. So in the monastic era of medicine, they were largely using Dioscorides de Materia Medica, so they would have been using it, if not writing about it a lot. But St. Hildegard von Bingen probably referenced chicory. Wow, okay. Let's try that one again. St. Hildegard von Bingen seems to have referenced chicory in her classic work Physica, written around 1100. She mentioned an herb called sunny Herbal, which is Old German, and would be used for either chicory or dandelion. Essentially, they were considered two varieties of the same plant. The plant she describes seems to be very similar to chicory. She recommended the herb for digestive problems, especially combined with burdock. That's very common. Dandelion, chicory, and burdock are used almost universally for digestive issues, liver and skin health. Skin and liver are very connected. So the chicory continued into the German folk medicine tradition. Father Nape, Brother Aloysius, and Father Kunzel all wrote about chicory. Father Nape said of wild chicory or succory, that's more the English name. The plant is called in German Wegwort, literally waiting in the way. It will be found by the roadside, waiting patiently to be plucked for the household pharmacy. Love the way Father Nape wrote. It's very poetic, and he had a good sense of humor, too. All the old German herbalists did. They tended to be more like Bavarian and Austrian and such, and they're really like that good-natured, funny side of German culture, rural German culture. Some of the best folks I've ever known have been from that part of the world. Not the, in the cities demanding Nazi types that I've also had experience with. In the countryside, the Germanic people are remarkably hospitable. Remarkably hospitable. I don't know what it is about the cities, or maybe I don't know. There really are two different cultures, though. You can't say that the Bavarians are, anything like the. Well, anyway, we'll get on. I can ramble on, can't I? It is also, well, we don't need to. Okay, it's also called turnsole because it never turns its leaves upward toward the sun. The succory has an untidy and rough appearance. That's one of the reasons it's kind of considered weedy. It looks just kind of like it's been damaged, even though that's just the way it grows. He says it's rough and unkempt, like an unkempt child among its nearer comrades. The blue flowers alone, somewhat paler than the cornflower, raises its position and inspired a certain amount of respect. Appearances are often deceitful, and so it is with the wild succory, under its rough exterior bears a golden heart. Tea of succory leaves dissolves congluten, that's a hard one to say, conglutinations, essentially congestion, of the stomach and secretes gall and bile. It purifies liver, kidney, and milt and secretes unhealthy matter through the urine. The dose is 2 cups full a day, taken in the morning and evening during 3 or 4 days. The pains purifies liver, kidney, and milt. Okay, it can actually help with not only inflamed liver and all that. It's somewhat diuretic, and it can help with inflammation of the testes. So, pains and inflammations of the stomach may be relieved by compresses dipped in a hot infusion of succory leaves and flowers, renewed 2 or 3 times a day. Chicory leaves may be expressed in spirits, which will serve to rub consumptive or dwindling limbs 2 to 3 times a day. Essentially, that's saying make a tincture of chicory, and for atrophied muscles, it seems to have a tonic effect applied topically. As the leaves and blossoms, so also the roots may be employed for the same purpose, and these are easiest dug up in rainy weather. That is true. Never harvest the tops of an herb during rainy weather. They will begin to mold before they dry out. But roots can definitely be dug in the rain. If you live in a heavy clay, rocky soil like me, it's often easier. Brother Aloysius wrote, wild chicory grows abundantly on high ground, dikes, and along roadside verges. It is an herbaceous biennial plant, gray-green in color. The leaves are oblong. We don't need to know all that. You can look it up real easy. It's one of the most common plants. The long yellowish root contains a bitter sap. That's why, it's not berberine, but it's somewhat similar and very good for digestion. Leaves and roots can be used medicinally. The leaf infusion consists of 1/4 to 1/2 cup per 2 cups boiling water. That's a tea, 2 cups taken daily. The root decoction is 1/2 to 1/3 to 1/2 cup for 2 cups of water, and this should be reduced by half, so you're making a decoction. And a tablespoon taken every 2 hours. It's very common in German medicine is just to take a tablespoon of a decoction every 2 hours. The leaf infusion is recommended for constipation, mucus stomach, and excessive gall. It cleanses the liver, spleen, kidney, stomach, and promotes digestion. A tincture of the root in 75% alcohol is used externally to rub weak limbs twice a day. Take 2 cups of tea made from the leaf decoction as an excellent remedy for a mucus stomach, for it encourages digestion and puts the stomach in order again. The decoction of the roots, the leaves, and stems is highly recommended for pneumonia and chest catarrh or congestion. Father Kunzel, who was Swiss, said the chicory was already known as a medicinal plant in ancient times. A coffee drink was made from the root with grated chicory. True, we'll get into that in just a little bit. So it is by no means a modern factory product, but an herb and a luxury product that has been known for centuries, which was also used to keep the body healthy. Not only the roots, but also the leaves of grafted chicory. I'm not exactly sure what he means grafted in that way of use. Through the roasting process, the root provides the well-known luxury food that we now know under the name of chicory that has developed into an excellent coffee additive. Chicory owes its wide distribution mainly to the health-promoting properties. In particular, it stimulates the appetite and is beneficial in digestion. I guess we should just go ahead and discuss that. You will see many herbs that say they're a substitute for coffee. I've never seen any that are. Okay, chicory root roasted and ground and made into essentially a tea is more like coffee in flavor than dandelion or most others. You can do an acorn coffee. All these were done, like a survival kind of thing, basically. I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. But when roasted the right way and combined with the right coffee the right way, chicory makes coffee much better. Now, if you've had bad chicory coffee, like Louisiana, for instance, great company. They do a lot for charity. I hate their coffee. You may be thinking that's disgusting. Well, it is actually. But try Community Coffee, also from Louisiana, made in New Orleans, been around forever. On its own, the coffee is like very strong and bitter. Add a little bit of milk, and it brings out the sweetness of the chicory. Add a little shot of bourbon, and you'll think you just put sugar and vanilla in there. I mean, it is amazing. It is really the very best coffee. I would rather have that community coffee, just the original with chicory, little milk and bourbon in there, than I would the most expensive grind of coffee in the world. It's fantastic. And it's all because of the way they combine and the way they roast and combine the chicory and the coffee. Really, really good. That comes from the Creole tradition. That is really good stuff. And they've been doing it that way for, well, longer than America's been a nation. They've been combining chicory with coffee in the New Orleans area. So in the Old English tradition, as I said, chicory was called succory. And Gerard said, these herbs, when they be green, have virtue to stop the hot burning of the liver, to help the stopping of the gall, yellow jaundice, lack of sleep, stopping of the urine, and hot burning fevers. A syrup thereof is very good for the diseases aforesaid. In other words, you could use it as a tea, or you could make it into a syrup and use it the same way. And he also said the distilled water is good in potions, cooling, and purging drinks. The distilled water of endive, plantain, and roses profiteth against excoriations in the conduit of the yard to be injected with a syringe. I have no idea what he's talking about. Seriously. But he also says they're good for kidney and bladder stones. And these herbs eaten in salad otherwise, and it would have been cooked salad in England, do comforteth the weak and feeble stomach, and cooleth and refresheth the stomach overmuch heated. You gotta love Elizabethan English. The leaves of succory bruised are good against inflammation of the eyes and being outward applied to the grieved place. So anywhere you've got inflammation makes a good poultice. Culpeper, about 100 years later, talked of both the garden, the cultivated, and the wild. Let's see. He says it was an herb of Jupiter. And again, I don't know what he means because I'm not an astrologist. But he was very big into that kind of thing. He said it is more dry and less cold than endive or the cultivated, so it opens more. A handful of the leaves or roots boiled in wine and water, and a draught therefore drank fasting, drives forth choleric and phlegmatic humors, opens obstructions of the liver, gall, and spleen, helps the yellow jaundice, the heat of the rains, it's the kidneys, and of the urine, and the dropsy, it's a diuretic, and also those that have an evil disposition in their bodies by a reason of long sickness, including bad diet, which the Greeks called cachexia. Cachexia, I don't know. Anyway, he thought it was good for people who hadn't been eating good. Let's just go with that. The decoction made thereof with wine and drunk is effectual against long lingering agues or fevers, and a dram of the seed in powder drank in wine before a fit of ague helps to drive it away. So it'd be good to stop a fever. Back then it was a lot of malarial fevers, and they were always looking for something that would stop the fever before it came on. The distilled water of the herb and its flowers, if you can take them in time, hath the like properties. So also good for fevers, but was especially good for hot stomachs and either pestilential or of long continuance, for swoonings and passion of the heart, so fainting essentially, for heat and headache in children, and for the blood and the liver. The said water or juice of the brewed leaves is applied outwardly, allay swellings, inflammation, St. Anthony's fire, wheals and pimples, sores and pimples essentially, especially used with a little vinegar as, also good for other sores as a wash. The water of the plant, good for sore eyes, inflamed with redness. for sore breasts, and especially if they're pained by the abundance of milk. Wild succory is, as it is more bitter, so it is more strengthening to the stomach and liver than the cultivated. By 1931, Miss Grieve wrote of the English tradition. Oh, she goes into a lot of history. We've already covered a lot of history. I don't want to run too long here, but she talks about it in with the Arabian traditions, the Chinese tradition even. She was somewhat familiar with that. How it was cultivated by the Romans, how it's blended with coffee, especially in America. By 1930s, it was not a popular garden vegetable in England. No, they're just not big on garden vegetables. I mean, raw vegetables, salad greens. Everything was cooked. They're eating more, raw vegetables now than they did in the 1930s. But it was actually more used as a forage crop for cattle, believe it or not. The She said the leaves used in salads are much superior to dandelion. They may be cut from young plants and used, but are generally blanched. So even then, they was blanching them before they put them in the salad. It was not a raw salad. I often make a raw salad of dandelion and chicory and such as that. Um, let's see. She particularly used the root medicinally. And medicinal actions, chicory has properties similar to those of dandelion, its action being tonic, laxative, and diuretic. So I think that's a pretty good place to wrap it up. Chicory is really easy to spot once you get to know it. Like I said, it's like essentially a blue dandelion that grows a little bit taller and always kind of looks like it's been beaten up a little bit. Um, I'm, I use it so interchangeably with dandelion, both in salads and in medicine, that I would just say any way you can use dandelion, you can use chicory, with the exception that the the root is better in coffee than dandelion root, or as a coffee substitute. If you're trying to do like a coffee substitute with chaga, a lot of people are doing that these days. The chaga mushroom has so many wonderful health properties, and ground up, it makes something very much like instant coffee. The addition of some roasted chicory root to that blend, I think, would be absolutely fantastic. I would definitely not turn my nose up at that. And the endive or endive, they're really so good. If they don't carry them at your local market, ask them to. If not, you may have to grow them yourself. And in order to grow them, they have to be what they call blanched. When the plant comes up, you have to cover it and keep the sun away from it so it grows white. You're probably going to want to grow them in plants and bring them into maybe your basement. You could actually, they need a little light to get going, and then you kind of turn the lights off on them. It'd be a good one to grow in the basement through the winter. Definitely look into that. And like I said, braised with butter, a little bit of wine. You can even put a little pinch of sugar in there just to bring out the natural sweetness. Really, really fantastic. But anyway, y'all, that's from my book, Medicinal Herbs and Weeds for the American South. Another book that make a great Christmas present. Remember that. And for people that aren't interested in herbs, remember my Omnivore's Guide to Cooking, which has a whole chapter on baking cornbread and frying cornbread and grits and all kinds of different tortillas and all different ways of using dried corn, as well as a chapter on using fresh corn. Does make a great gift. So maybe I'll talk to you tomorrow a little bit. If I do a live stream, I'll send out an announcement through my Substack newsletter, Judson Carroll Master Herbalist at Substack.com. Like I said, I probably won't, because I think the weather's going to be too bad. But if I do, I'll let you know. So maybe keep an eye out for that. And definitely, if you want a set of cherry cooking spoons, I have one on the site now for sale. The one I posted last Monday was gone in the blink of an eye. The second set was a different design. It's been on there a couple of days and hadn't sold, but I think it's probably going to go pretty quickly once this podcast goes out, because I really hadn't done much promotion of it before now. And a third set of cherry cooking spoons should be up on Wednesday. And if you want those for yourself or for your as a gift, jump on it. right away because I've already actually had inquiries. People are saying, "Are you gonna be making any more of those?" And I will, and I want everybody to kind of have a fair shot at them because they are each one is one of a kind, handmade, unique item. This happens to come from a wild cherry tree that was growing in my yard, and I live on a northwest slope, and so it was growing at an angle. And one winter, the snow just took it down. It's about the only way you're going to get wild cherry in quality to carve because it just it was well, wild cherry bark is an excellent herb for making cough syrups. It has an antitussive quality. So between the demand for the wood in early American furniture making and the bark in herbalism, it was really over-harvested. But of course, wild cherries produce a little choke cherry and other wild cherry fruit. So the birds and the critters have kept it from going extinct. But they tend to drop those seeds where it's not going to grow very well. Oftentimes they'll be sitting on one tree and, of course, drop a seed. And the cherry tree comes up far too crowded to get very large, or it grows in an odd growth pattern. So kind of hard to get hold of this wood. It has a beautiful grain and a color like you wouldn't believe. Go to the site now and check out the two I've got for sale if you're interested. It's judsoncarrollwoodcraft.substack.com to see that grain and to see that color. I oil them with walnut oil and look at those pictures. I mean, they're beautiful. So I've got 12 logs left of this tree. So once it's gone, it's gone. Over the next few months, I'll be doing a lot in cherry. I want to do some bowls, some dough bowls and such, bread bowls. Hopefully, I can arrive at a couple boards for like a bread board, charcuterie board, cheese board, something like that. But yeah, when this one's gone, it's gone because it's very hard to find wild cherry for carving, and the scent is incredible. And I'm going to use those wood chips. I mean, that may be something I'll show you tomorrow of how I'm smoking a turkey and I'm taking those wood chips and putting them on the coals and that wonderful smoke that rolls up around the turkey. I know everybody in my mother's neighborhood is going to be dropping in to say hi tomorrow when they smell that smoke. I know one neighbor already said, "Hey, if you're smoking a turkey again this year, I'd love to have some." He's such a nice guy. I mean, I will try to save him a little bit. Yeah. Anyway, y'all have a great week. I hope from the bottom of my heart that you get to spend some time with your loved ones for Thanksgiving. Friends and family. I know a lot of people won't be able to. And you'll be in my prayers if you can't. And, feel free to send me a message. Send me an email. Contact me on Substack or Twitter or Gab or Truth if you need to chat a little bit. I'll be online. I check in 4 or 5 times a day. I have to keep up in case somebody's ordered a book or they've ordered a spoon or they have a question I need to answer. I'm always available and always available to chat. So anyway, y'all have a great week. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I hope you eat too much, and I hope you have a good, relaxing time. And I hope it's exactly what you want it to be. That's my prayer for you today. So have a good one. I'll talk to you next week.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.